It was 11:47 at night, on a Thursday in November, outside the Marriott on Peachtree Street in Atlanta, Georgia. And the rain was the kind that doesn't announce itself. No thunder, no build-up, just a cold and steady presence that had been there so long the city had stopped noticing it. The doorman had his umbrella up, the valet was moving fast, and standing at the curb in a plain black hoodie, gray sweatpants, no security, no assistant, no one, was Shaquille O'Neal. 4 rings, 14 all-star selections, a net worth that had crossed $400 million. He was standing on a wet sidewalk in Atlanta at midnight because the event had run long, his driver had been released 2 hours early on a miscommunication, and the simplest solution was a cab. He raised his hand. A yellow taxi pulled forward from the hotel rank, its light on, its engine running. The driver looked at him through the glass. He looked for a long moment. Shaq was 6'8". He was large in the way that door frames notice. The rain was coming down, and the man was standing there with his hand up and his face visible under the hotel awning lights. And the driver, a man in his mid-50s, heavy-set, gray at the temples, a small laminated photo on his dashboard that Shaq could not make out from where he stood, looked at him and then looked forward again, and pulled away. Shaq lowered his hand. He stood there for a moment in the rain, said nothing to the doorman, said nothing to anyone. But he had seen 2 things before that cab pulled away that he filed quietly and said nothing about. The first was the photo on the dashboard, laminated, small, worn at the edges the way photos get when someone touches them often. The second was the number on the cab's roof light, 1174. He had seen it in the brief second the cab sat idling, and the kind of mind that memorized plays and defensive schemes and business contracts in the same week had no trouble holding on to a 4-digit number. He took out his phone, made a call, waited. Now here is what nobody standing outside that Marriott understood yet. What was about to happen had nothing to do with one rainy night in November. It had been building for 11 years. There was a thread running from that wet Atlanta curb all the way back to a community rec center in Decatur, Georgia, on a Saturday morning in 2012, and the man behind the wheel of cab 1174 had absolutely no idea that the person he had just left standing in the rain was the same person whose name was written in marker on the back of the laminated photo he touched every single morning before he started his shift. Trust us when we say you need to stay for the whole story, because the ending does not arrive where you think it will. Shaquille Rashawn O'Neal was born on March 6, 1972, in Newark, New Jersey. His mother, Lucille O'Neal, was 5'3" and built entirely from the kind of resolve that does not make noise about itself. She had one belief she gave to her son, the way other mothers give vitamins, daily, without ceremony, because she understood it was something he would need long after she could remind him. She would look up at him, this enormous boy of hers, already blocking doorways by the time he was 12, and she would say, "The world will show you who it thinks you are. You show it who you actually are." Never in the same breath, never at the same volume. It was not a speech, it was weather. He grew up inside it. His stepfather, Philip Harrison, Sergeant Philip Harrison, U.S. Army, built the other half. The stillness. The refusal to react on another person's timeline. Philip Harrison had one rule he repeated across every circumstance without variation. The first move is never yours to make. The right move is. He said it when Shaq lost. He said it when Shaq won. He said it the morning of the 1992 draft, when Shaq was 20 years old and could not sit still. And Philip had put one hand on his shoulder and said it one more time, and Shaq had understood it differently that day than he ever had before. Philip Harrison died in 2013, but in every room, in every cab rank, On every wet sidewalk since that day, there has been a version of Philip Harrison somewhere nearby, arms folded, waiting to see which move gets made. The rise, you know. LSU. Orlando. 4 championships across 2 franchises. The shoes, the films, the records, the doctorate, the philanthropy. By the time Shaquille O'Neal stood on Peachtree Street in November of 2023, his net worth had crossed $400 million. He was wearing gray sweatpants. He was standing in the rain. He was already thinking 3 moves ahead. The driver of cab 1174 was a man named Raymond Dockery, 54 years old, originally from Macon, Georgia. He had driven a cab in Atlanta for 9 years, working the hotel rank from 9 p.m. to 3 a.m., 4 nights a week, in the specific and disciplined way of a man who has calculated exactly how many hours of his life he can trade for exactly how much money without losing the rest of it entirely. He had not always driven a cab. For 22 years before that, Raymond Dockery had been a high school basketball coach. DeKalb County, 3 different schools across 2 decades. His record was not remarkable on paper, 147 wins, 189 losses. But records on paper do not count the boys who came in one way and left another. And Raymond had always understood that the score at the end of a game was the least important number on the board. What mattered was the number of kids who left his gym knowing something about themselves they had not known when they walked in. He had stopped coaching 11 years ago, not by choice. His wife, Carol, had been diagnosed with early-onset Parkinson's in the spring of 2012. She was 44 years old. Raymond had stood in the neurologist's office on a Tuesday morning with his hands in his pockets and heard the word, and then heard everything the doctor said after the word, and had driven home and sat in the driveway for 25 minutes before going inside. He did not cry in the driveway. He made a list. The list had 7 items on it, and the second item was, find work with flexible hours and no evening commitments. Coaching evening games was item 3 on the list of things that could not continue. He had been angry about this for a long time. The anger had eventually settled into something quieter. Not acceptance, but a kind of management. The way you manage a back injury you are never fully going to recover from. He drove his cab. He came home. He sat with Carol through the hard evenings. He touched the laminated photo on his dashboard every morning before his first fare, because Carol had given it to him the year he quit coaching and told him to keep it where he could see it. The photo was of his last team. 14 boys in blue and white. One of them was looking directly at the camera with an expression that was somewhere between a smile and a question. That boy's name was Dion. Raymond had not seen Dion Williamson in 11 years. He had not seen any of them. The leaving had been too fast, and the grief of it had made going back feel like a thing that would cost more than he could afford. On the night he pulled away from the Marriott on Peachtree Street, Raymond Dockery had been driving for 6 hours. Carol had had a difficult afternoon. He had left her with her sister. He was tired in the specific, bone-level way of a man who has been tired for 11 years and has long since stopped expecting not to be. He had looked at the enormous man at the curb, and something in him, a thing he had never examined and would not have been able to name, had made the calculation before he consciously made the decision. Too large, too much, not tonight. He had looked away and pulled forward and told himself it was about the seat clearance, the way drivers sometimes do when they need a reason that isn't the real one. He had driven half a block before something shifted in his chest. A small thing, like a gear that had been slipping finally catching. He had looked in his rearview mirror. The man was still standing there, in the rain, not moving, not yelling, not on his phone, just standing there the way very few people are capable of standing anywhere, completely still, completely present, completely without urgency. Raymond had kept driving, but the image stayed. 40 minutes later, Raymond Dockery pulled back into the hotel rank for his next rotation. It was standard practice, the cycle of the rank. Leave, complete a fare or two, return. He had done it hundreds of times. He pulled in behind 2 other cabs, turned his light back on, picked up his coffee from the cup holder. There was a knock on the passenger window. He turned. The man in the black hoodie was crouching beside his door. Not aggressive, not theatrical, just there, at eye level, in the rain, looking at him with an expression Raymond could not immediately categorize. It was not anger. It was not the look of a man who wanted a confrontation. Raymond lowered the window 2 inches. "You're Raymond Dockery," the man said, not a question. Raymond said nothing. "You coached at Stevenson High School, 2009 to 2012. Raymond's hand moved to the door lock, then stopped. "You had a player named Dion Williamson." The coffee cup in Raymond's hand went still. "I need about 5 minutes of your time," Shaquille O'Neal said, "and then you can decide what you want to do with the rest of it." Raymond Dockery got out of the cab. He would not be able to explain later why he did this. He would try, multiple times, to different people, and the closest he ever got was, "He said Dion's name. Nobody's said that name to me in years. I got out." They stood on the sidewalk under the awning, 2 men in the rain, one of them enormous and one of them not, and Shaquille O'Neal told Raymond Dockery what he knew. In the fall of 2012, the same fall Raymond had left coaching, a 17-year-old named Dion Williamson had attended a basketball skills clinic in Decatur, Georgia. The clinic had been organized quietly, with no publicity, by a foundation that Shaq funded personally. 12 kids, a gym, 4 hours. Shaq had been there for 90 minutes of it, working the post drills, running the footwork exercises, doing the thing his mother had built him to do, being the reason someone else thought bigger than they came in thinking. Dion had been one of the 12. After the clinic, Dion had stayed behind while the other kids left. He had sat on the bleachers, and Shaq had sat next to him, and the kid had said nothing for a minute and then said, "My coach just quit. Just like that. The whole team didn't even get to say goodbye." Shaq had asked who the coach was. Dion had said the name. Shaq had filed it. The way he filed things. He had not known what Raymond Dockery's specific situation was at the time. He had found out later, piece by piece, over years, through the Foundation's community contacts in DeKalb County, and what he had found had made the filing feel like it had been worth the space it took up. Dion Williamson was now 30 years old. He was a high school basketball coach himself. His first full season at Columbia High School in Decatur had ended 3 months ago with a region championship, the program's first in 19 years. In the post-game interview, on a phone recording that one of the parents had sent to the foundation, he had said 2 things that the interviewer had not known what to do with, and that Shaq had watched 11 times. He had said, "I had a coach who taught me that the score at the end is the least important number on the board." And then he had said, "Coach Dockery, if you're watching this, I never got to say goodbye. So, thank you." Raymond Dockery had not seen that video. He had no idea it existed. Shaq took out his phone, pressed play, turned the screen toward the man standing in the rain. Raymond watched 14 seconds of it and then looked away. He put his hand over his mouth. He stood like that for a moment, a man trying to hold something in that was not going to be held. Then he stopped trying. He cried the way men cry when they have been not crying for 11 years, suddenly, completely, without warning, as though a wall that had been doing its job for a long time had simply decided it was done. Shaq said nothing. He stood next to him, in the rain, the way his stepfather had once sat across a kitchen table at 2 in the morning, just present, just there, not rushing toward the resolution. When Raymond was ready, Shaq showed him the rest of the video, and then he showed him one more thing, a card. Not plain white this time, the Foundation's card, with an address in Decatur and a director's name and a number. He set it on the cab's roof, in the dry space under the rank's overhang, where it would stay dry. "Dion's team has their first playoff game in 3 weeks," he said. "The program could use someone in the stands who knows what that gym used to look like before he got there." He picked up his phone, called his driver, who arrived in 4 minutes. He turned back to Raymond one last time. "I don't need an apology," he said. "I need you to go to that game." He got in the car. "The first move is never yours to make. The right move is." A man named Raymond Dockery sat in his cab for a long time after the black car pulled away. He picked up the card from the roof. He looked at the laminated photo on his dashboard. 14 boys in blue and white, one of them looking at the camera with an expression between a smile and a question. He had not understood that expression for 11 years. He thought he might be beginning to. 3 weeks later, in a gym in Decatur, Georgia, a first-year coach named Dion Williamson was drawing up a late-game play on a whiteboard when he looked up and saw someone in the 3rd row of the bleachers he had not seen since he was 17 years old. He stopped drawing. He stood there for a moment. Then he walked to the bleachers and sat down next to the man and said nothing. And the man said nothing, and neither of them needed to. They watched the game together. Carol Dockery, at home with her sister that evening, got a phone call from Raymond at halftime. He said, "I just wanted you to know where I am." She asked how he was doing. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I think I'm doing better." She said, "I know." Somewhere, a woman named Lucille O'Neill was right about something she had said 1,000 times to an enormous boy who grew up into a man who understood, eventually, that the world showing you who it thinks you are is just an invitation to show it who you actually are. Never in the same breath, never at the same volume, just quietly, in the rain, 3 moves ahead. Drop a comment and tell us, where are you watching from, and is there someone in your life who coached you and never heard what it meant? This one deserves a share. If it hit you, give it a like. That is the only way this story finds the people who need it. Subscribe and join the community that always comes back for the ones that matter. The next video is right there waiting. We will see you there.